to give each side's version of this exclusive one, we understand. One of the most talked about.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to PiFi number 102. How are you, Patrick?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I'm saying hi to Patrick first because they can see him. They can't see our mysterious guest, Breaker, who was having some audio. Well, we don't know quite what was going on. It may be that someone didn't want us to do this show, or it may be that he was just having audio issues, and I was actually having audio issues. So sorry for getting started so late. But how are you, Breaker? You can tell us. You can tell the true story now. I was just trying to be funny.
Oh no, man! Like I'm all about having a good time with this show, and I'm really excited to be here tonight. So thank you so much for giving me a call.
No, I've always been really interested in this, cryptography and code breaking. One of my favorite movies is A Beautiful Mind. And so I don't know.
I was born in Princeton, to be honest with you. I know John Nash and his son. I played chess with John Nash's son. That's pretty cool.
Really? Huh.
Oh, yeah.
So many things I didn't know about you already.
He whooped my ass probably 6 games in a row at Burger King at downtown Princeton on Nassau Street. And then I just kind of put my pride aside and then walked out and just sat in the park and smoked a few cigarettes and to contemplate life. That kind of put me on the right course to learning a little bit more about game theory and strategy. And John Nash, John Nash was responsible for developing mathematical computations of, I guess you could say, stratagems and plotting out courses of like human psychology and interpretations of actions and reactions and things like that. But he did so mathematically, so he's really, really insightful kind of guy. They tried to make fun of him. They were like, we'll pick on this guy. But he ends up getting one of the biggest kind of, contracts for Princeton that they'd had in a while, which helped develop a little bit of the military defense strategies that we use today, which is pretty interesting.
How long ago was that? When did he pass away? I forgot.
Well, he died in like a car crash. He was in like a taxi with his wife, I think, or something like that. And they were going to New York or somewhere. And the taxi had an accident. So I think he died in that crash. I can't remember exactly how he died.
I don't remember what year. I forgot what year that was.
It's like 2006 or something like that.
It's been quite a while. Yeah.
Maybe it was 2016. I can't remember.
Because he lived a good long time, didn't he?
He was a decent gentleman too, man. He was never. And the funny thing is when I showed up, I left him a message at his door when I came back to visit Princeton, and I went to his department because I had some, stuff that I wanted to talk about, mathematically, and had to do with computations of the odds of coincidence. And computations with the odds of coincidence with variables like things with ciphers are really difficult to plot because there's a lot of variables, you know what I mean? They all have to be included in the calculations. So they have a huge cryptography department at Princeton that deals with like cryptology, mostly like computer sciences. So they put together that kind of format. And I was trying to get in the door there because my dad's alumni at the college, and I was raised up at Princeton, just kind of like a college brat, conceived on the university's grounds and just kind of, thrown out into the world of private schools and all the, Ivy League college kind of levels, intelligence studies and things like that. But they gave all that just kind of like as a generic education early on. I even programmed the running man in BASIC in like 5th grade. So I had like, a pretty good amount of skill sets when I came into this field of cryptography. And cryptography for me became a part of my life when I was doing kind of like, I designed and engineered my own product line of work bikes. So when I have a winter in Vermont where I was running my company, I didn't have much business. So I would just be sitting in the shop, and I was wondering, what am I going to do to make some money to expand? So I was looking online and saw these weird treasure hunts, and they all had ciphers tied to them. And everyone loves like a good treasure hunt. You know what I mean? So everyone loves seeing big numbers like, oh, some guys buried 50 million in gold in Virginia, and it's it's found somewhere out in the middle of the Rockies, somewhere like that. So there was a bunch of work on the Beale ciphers that I did, and ended up tracking down their gold mines, which was pretty cool. After that, I got into another adventure, which is kind of like a mission that was made from France all the way to New France in Vermont. And I discovered a vault 150 feet off the ground in the side of a cliff with such ciphers. And I put together like a documentary with the State Historical Preservation Society, the archaeologists there. And I did some YouTube videos on it and some, talk and stuff like that, online. There was a lot going on at the time. So there was a lot of conjecture because the mystery itself is very famous. It leads to Oak Island, but it also leads off of Oak Island, the fabled 10-season show that has been spinning around every inch of the island hasn't found anything because everybody already tried that like for the last 200 years. So it was pretty cool to be able to break that down. And I even tried to contact them, and Prometheus Entertainment that does their show, they contacted me and wanted to give me 15 minutes on a sideshow called Beyond Oak Island to run like one of the most treasured kind of like adventures that there ever was conceived, like the greatest mission that like all the nations had made to the new world. Yeah, they wanted to kind of like wipe that away and turn it into like a 15-minute summary about how I was able to find like this golden trail right to the vault without stuttering myself once on any of the clues. So I mean, it was just kind of like a natural thing at that point. My dad, he was the first president of the Boy Scout Explorers, and I was always into like caving, climbing, and outdoor recreation. Like I grew up in the weekends in Tennessee on my grandparents' farm, so we were always adventuring and like running around in the woods and just checking things out. We were naturally curious to see the world around us. So I've always been intrigued at when there's a mystery that leads to a physical location, I always kind of latch onto it and want to kind of figure it out, which is how I got my start in cryptography. Things took a different turn. Yeah.
At what age did you sort of know that you were, that it was an interest?
It was 2016 when I started. 2014 when I started getting good, and 2015 I was on top of the game with some huge discoveries. And 2016, I made some breakthroughs in the code breaks. I spent 10 hours examining the Amerithrax letters for ciphers.
I mean, as a child, I'm talking about what was your inspiration as a child. I mean, like me, I always knew as a child I wanted to be a builder, right? Did you know?
Oh, okay.
Did you know at some point early in life that you had an interest in?
Everything was like architecture and AutoCAD and mechanical engineering were my niches, and I was able to pioneer my own product line. I never had gone to engineering school, but I had ridden bikes for years. So it was kind of like, my business side of things. I'm a peddler, like I used to be a coolie, a rickshaw driver. So I've been kind of like trying to find a way to make work bikes easier to operate. I've been trying to find like the best opportunity for riders to be able to make money on a bike and try and be like an enabler and create jobs and environmentally sound jobs. So they're not, they're just helping running services in the city without using motor vehicles and creating exhaust. So, and it's a really nice sight to see when somebody can actually carry weight on a work bike, but maintain the same pace with traffic. And, it kind of shows like a commercial application that can be applied to like UPS, FedEx, Domino's pizza fleets. Like you think about it, we could probably incorporate the function of it. I've been doing this work for like the last 10 years. And like I said, man, I started off in AutoCAD in school and had an OJT program and worked in 3 firms just as an apprentice, like a commercial, residential, and urban renewal. And then like a big landscaping firm out in Palm Springs, Palm Desert. The whole entire entourage of everything that I worked on, which is based on building. kind of same as you,
Yeah.
And I did a lot of commercial projects early on. I did a lot of construction projects early on. And so I had gained a lot of experience, but I got into more like at a certain point where one of the projects that I was doing was building a climbing facility in San Francisco. And then I ended up just getting really sick from it and didn't know what was going on with it. And it turns out there was an abatement going on of asbestos, and the guy never really told us about it. And then afterwards, I came down with the asbestosis.
Oh no.
Yeah, I got a lesion in three nodes in my lung, and it started causing lymphedema. I didn't really notice the nodes or anything. There wasn't any pain or anything, but I started getting lymphedema, and I noticed that. So when I got checked out, she ran me for scans and asked me questions, and she was like, first question was, have you ever worked in a factory or something that had asbestos in it or an abatement? I was like, oh no, that's what this was. So my ultimate goal and my pursuits kind of took me out of the architectural firm and the mechanical side of it, and behind a CAD station, and it put me in a field position, and it ended up just kind of leading me down a road that I just wasn't able to kind of control the elements of. Because by the time I had moved out there on this project, they had me set up for all kinds of backing and stuff to relocate and be the management. But then they just
are you still doing that kind of work now?
Yeah, I do the design. I'm a madman when it comes to AutoCAD, and I've been designing little small urban renewal projects because some of these ciphers that I have, they've got a lot of rewards in them, like over some of them close to like $3.5 million, And
well, what do you mean? What do you mean they have rewards? That's really where I was trying to go with this.
Yeah, they're cold cases that have kind of like, FBI is like, oh, we need help solving this case. There was a letter, and the letter had a bunch of weird marks in it, and we want to know if anybody can figure out if there's like a cipher behind it, or there's at times there were actual physical ciphers and like letters that were taunting police sent in, and they were just kind of like turning basically into the Joker, and they were asking Batman to come out of the Batcave, solve the case,
But how do you what kind of channels do you get those type of cipher, that work through? I mean, how do you know that the FBI has letters out there that you can, was that when you were involved with the American Cryptogram Association, or are there channels
I started doing the breaks first on my own independently, got the recognition of some state officials, and then I decided to join the ACA and convince them to host their annual convention in Burlington, like where I was living, And part of the adventure was just kind of like explain how I broke the ciphers, and I invited a guest note or the keynote speaker for the guest speaker position from Norway, who was one of the guys that was on the Oak Island show. But he was the only guy that ever found anything, and he was breaking ciphers in Shakespeare. So he was doing work in Shakespeare, which was one of the parts of the steps that you needed to kind of figure this all out, to kind of fully encompass the documentary about the vault I found on the side of the cliff. So after that, I was like, okay, well, I've got a pretty good reputation and standing. Now I can work within the group with other projects and gain, recognition for them. Because ultimately, I mean, if you can't find a buried treasure, you're going to have to take another gig, building some cybersecurity thing, or, it's something for like a computer program, or, anything. You're like generally either that, or you just develop a flawless new encryption system, and everybody wants to buy it or use it, and you make money that way. But the only other way to make money in it is kind of, you go on the FBI's website, and it's like, okay, here's their cold cases, here's their history of cryptography. These are the letters that were part of the evidence dockets. Go ahead and see if you can break the codes. And so it's kind of like, some people call it a recruitment tool, but it really isn't. It's more like they're just asking for professionals. Because it's so random and rare that this happens. They don't keep somebody really on board doing this stuff.
Do you have any questions about that, Patrick?
No, not that I can think of. It's an interesting path, that's for sure.
I was wondering how you you ever get paid for that type of work, or is it just volunteer?
Well, the thing is some of them, they don't have rewards attached to them. They're just like, if you have a tip or whatever, so I'll just tip them, you know. But if they throw in like like major case, like with the anthrax attacks, that happened in Princeton. It was in my hometown. So I was like, I couldn't help but look into it at that point. You know what I mean?
When did those happen? That was that like 15 or years ago? When was that?
2001.
2001. Wow, that's been 20 years, 23 years.
Yep. And then the ricin attacks came right after that from the fallen angel letters. And those were like 2 sets of letters that were sent in, you know, like everybody was looking at it going like, this is just ridiculous. Just like some serial killer now, you know, it's like the Zodiac killer all over again, you know, that sort of thing.
Did they find the person responsible for that? I don't remember.
With the Ameritrax letters, they tried to accuse first they tried to invade Afghanistan and Iraq, say it was Saddam Hussein in a mobile bioweapons factory, you know, in some back of some van somewhere or a trailer, which was totally drummed up on suspicions of like, how could it have been done and we don't know about it. And then they just invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. And after that, they then tried to accuse this guy named Hatfield, right? And then out of nowhere, the final accusation was, oh yeah, we found a cipher in the Ameritrax letters, and it was one of our own bioweapons laboratory research specialists. You know, he's a biodefense research specialist.
You sent those. I'm looking at all the attachments that you sent me. Can you, Fallen Angel Ricin letters, can you guide me to one that I can show people in the on the show so I can share the screen?
Go to the last of the attachments. The last of the attachments, we'll start with the timeline of the Ameritrax letters real quick.
Okay, let me see.
They're colorful. They're like orange and black and have like a grid and a graph to them and a bunch of letters.
Okay, you know? Yeah, I see some graph paper with one open our letter sports A is in our rotation. Is that the right one?
No, it's probably okay. So, like on the emails, there was the Fallen Angel was a list of graph paper productions, which just were examinations of the letters. The Ameritrax letters, those are kind of like attachments. Those were like the last 3 attachments on one of the emails I sent you.
Okay, let me see. I think I know which one it is here. Let me see. You can't see, since you're on the phone, you can't see the screen, can you?
No.
It says this. It says take a penicillin now, death to America, death to Israel.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. That sounds real. Yeah, that sounds real. Let's run through that real quick. Like, what's your first inkling, you know, without seeing all the stuff there? Like,
Can you see that, Patrick? Can you see the graph, the image I'm showing, Patrick?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. I couldn't see it from the studio side. So go ahead, kind of describe what we're looking at. I'm looking at the one with the red slash through it.
Okay, so you're looking at one that's kind of a steganography trick. And that's probably one of the most simple tricks that you can produce. And because what that does is it utilizes a symbol or like a single alteration of like a piece of text inside of the letter, or like a couple extra dots on the page, you know, to kind of say, okay, we'll like draw a line this way, right? So if you're looking at the word take penicillin, it's spelled wrong, right?
Mm-hmm,
and and it kind of looks like it's take penicil or take your pencil, right? And then that little L in the penicillin, obviously that looks like a little kind of arrow, almost like a computer, like a technical kind of arrow, you know, but it's kind of like bent like an L. So what I'm looking at is take your pencil, draw the line on an angle, and it completely cuts through the message, and it says death to Allah. Now in America, Israel is great.
Looks like, but was this cipher proven, or is this just Like, was this actually used in that case, or was this just your?
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, see, they went off the handle, as the FBI usually does at times when they're just kind of juggling suspects. So they already threatened. They're like, okay, we're going to blow up Iraq, we're going to blow up Afghanistan, and then we're going to turn around and they accused one of their own, who was named Hatfield, and he ended up suing and proving he had nothing to do with it. He got $5 million out of it. And then after that, they were trying to, keep damage control because they're still occupying everything. So like, how are we going to keep this going? So they turn around and they drop in like another accusation against one of their own guys. And basically what they're looking at is they've got no declaration in the past that there's anything in the letters other than the statements that are there. So for the invasion of Iraq, Afghanistan, and the accusations made against Hatfield, there's no cipher in it. Then out of nowhere, they say, okay, now there's a cipher in it. But they didn't actually say there was a cipher in it. They just kind of drew a bunch of circles around, random letters, because those letters were the actual matches to like codons. But they were just randomly placed. There was no reason to highlight them. There was no structure to it that would stand out. And the goal with the cipher is that whether or not you're encrypting it as like a game to taunt police, or you're making hidden threats, or whether or not you're trying to talk to somebody in secret, the cipher has a specific way that the other person's going to interpret it.
Now you're saying that that text came from the letters from the person who sent the anthrax. In other words, I'm trying to understand this. You're reviewing the letters from the person who, obviously, you're saying they left letters or sent them, and you've gone through the letters and found these messages.
I found a clear context of a 3-layered cipher that's involved in each of them. But then there's also an addendum, and the addendum is built for each one of them. So in one of the addendums, you get a contact list that was found on the Washington Street Bridge when they arrested a group of Israelis in a van. And when they took them they detained them, questioned them, they gathered all the evidence they had on their possession and tested them positive for residues of explosives. They had boxes, box cutters, a sock full of like $4,800, a bunch of old expired work visas, and they were basically leaving the country on September 11th.
But the people
they had tickets booked. Now in their possession was one 2-page document that was called a contact list that had a list of names that were their contacts for urban moving systems, which was UMI, was like owned by Derek Suter, I think his name is, and managed to employ only Israelis that came from out of the country. It was like a way that Israelis had a chance to quote unquote go to work when they got to the U.S. was what they said the company was. But they found out.
What I'm trying to get to here is that so there's, I guess, first of all, I don't want to make any accusations against any Israelis or any particular people. I just want to. I'm trying to do a show about cryptography and because it's fascinating to me. But what I'm trying to get to is that how do we know? How do we know, and how does the audience know where that are the messages placed in the letters purposely, or was this just arbitrary coding that came out of something they randomly built?
It goes into a 3-layer system. And so what you pulled out was an addendum. You pulled out a piece which is used as an addendum. It's kind of like a directorate, and that's kind of like their closure, which is their final statement, their ultimate mission, death to Allah. What
you're saying is, and I really don't want to repeat the words "death to anything," okay? Because I don't want to spread the message. I don't want to spread those messages, okay? And I wish I hadn't shown that. But my question is, you're saying the author of those letters purposely placed that hidden message so that it could be found by someone like you, or is it just arbitrary?
It's
That's
so
a
it
proper
could be
term?
found. It's so it could be found by people that were in the intelligence community, and so they could pick up on things that they were planning. It was a way that one group was trying to communicate with another, and one group had arranged some plans after September 11th, and then basically connected and coordinated all of them with the use of these ciphers, in which they created like a series of lists of, targets and operations that they conducted over a period of time. And so that first operation was the fallen angel ricin letter. And that continued after that time. They had just killed, well, sorry for mentioning this, but the death of an AAG in Seattle ends up, kind of falling in play in this timeline of events. And here
The death of a what?
And as an assistant attorney general of the Supreme Court in Seattle, so they went after like a federal employee.
Who did?
It appears that they had made statements both in the fallen angel letters and in the later Gidget letter, which was mailed directly to the FBI, that they were involved as a small foreign faction that was tasked with, certain, I guess you could say, certain hits. And they were just not very nice people. And they were part of like an ongoing kind of, I guess you can say, hidden menace of things going on inside the entertainment industry as well. So, I mean, it has its ties to, geopolitical interests, monopolies of business, taking over certain jurisdictions of, oversight of the law and the practice of law in certain cities, so they could basically provide themselves buffering because they were planning to set up hubs for distribution of drugs in 2 locations, one in Burlington, Vermont, and one in Seattle. And so having associates already in Burlington established from previous affairs, they moved into trying to set up Seattle. And one of the ways they do their, I guess you could say, work for the last maybe 140 years or so using these ciphers is to basically conduct a ritualistic killing, commemorate it with like a letter, induce a state of fear and compliance, and then go off and do the work.
But did we find out who the actual person was that, I don't know enough about the history of this.
Yeah, that's okay.
Did we find out who actually sent the letters?
Well, I mean, I can tell you because it
mentions... Well, I mean... Were they ever convicted? I mean, was anybody, I guess my question is, was anybody ever convicted?
No, again, the FBI had played games. It was under their jurisdiction, and they had juggled, again, like 2 accusations of Americans. They tried to blame Americans for doing it.
So I can ask you, who do you think? I don't mind, like, I don't want to state for fact that, like, I don't want to just make a statement of fact, right? I want to ask I just want to make sure people know it's your opinion. Who do you think was responsible for the...
Well, these ciphers have a specific pattern to them, which means I've recognized them because they have specific traits that date back to the design of previous ciphers before them. And having discovered those being of central intelligence of the planning, then they were executing it by utilizing their, I guess you can say, their unknown element in the Israeli Aman and Mossad. And those are the 2 groups that deal with these sorts of things.
I guess I'm just having a hard time understanding why the Mossad, I mean, and this gets down some rabbit holes,
Why would Muslims blow up the World Trade Center but then come drop letters at fucking Princeton University? Princeton University, bro.
Sorry.
Like, we got nothing to do with it.
We'll try to keep the show clean. Sorry. Okay. Well, okay. I'm not trying to.
That's what this is all about.
That's what.
That's what this cipher series is all about. So we can go on to previous ones that are more historical. I mean, we can do a Jack the Ripper. We can do a Beale cipher. We can talk about any of the old classic cryptogram systems that were developed back with the advancement of learning of Francis Bacon. We can go into like.
I don't want you to think I'm not really afraid of it. I just don't want to make statements that haven't been proven. That's all. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to accuse Israelis of terrorism.
I'm just providing content for my research, and I hold the research to be kind of the evidentiary finding. I'm not even looking at the documents, and this is just my understanding of them. You see what I mean? Like this is how much I know the content that is inside. So I'm not really trying to be, tinfoil, or I'm not trying to run off on political conspiracy tangents.
That's right. The audience doesn't know you, so I'm trying to help, guide them through the fact that we're talking about cryptography.
Okay.
And we're not here to put anybody on trial or anything like that, or say, or I'm not going to give my opinions about who took out somebody when we don't have any real evidence of that. But Daniel, one of our regular watchers, mentioned like the Zodiac Killer. So that's a historical case. Or what kind of cases are interesting that you could talk about that where cryptography was involved?
I did a long research project on the Zodiac. If you'd like to hear some of the work and the breakthrough that I made on the Zodiac, it was pretty impressive. It was right at the same time that there were, other people on kind of news and shows presenting their evidence. There was a lot of chatter going on in the intelligence community. There were in the ACA, the American Cryptogram Association. They have an annual convention, and in the past, they had invited a couple guys in that were on a couple of the big shows. Dave Aranchek and I think the other guy's name is Bauer. I can't remember his first name. Kevin Bauer, I think his name was. And they've had like a lot of online presentations. There's like, a lady named Alonka Dunnan and another named Klaus Schmidt. They both have put together their own, I guess you can say, publications about things. Me, I'm planning to do books, like hard copy books, but I find the content is much more easily adapted to when you can see the visual mechanics and the operations of the ciphers as they move through like a visual animation of it, So what the only thing that we as a group, like even the ACA practices primarily, is being able to create a hard copy of a physical white paper and then be able to technically describe the function or the structure of the mechanics that's inside of each step of the cipher and the methods that it's broken down to derive the final message. Now, generally, these guys, they operate on what's called I guess you could say a plausible deniability factor. So they've figured out ways over a period of time through the studies of how to create their own kind of, escape room out of it. They've got the key to the escape, and they can basically use it anytime they want and live in a state of denial of it. And people they just don't have the intelligence to basically fathom this unless it's fully itemized and documented the right way. So I went on Facebook and I tried to put all my worksheets together, and some of these projects are so extensive that you can't keep a consistent timeline of it, because you'll come to a stump in something and you'll have to move forward to kind of go examine the other ciphers, because what you're trying to do is develop the overall pattern that the cipher, the method of encryption, is using. And so once you figure out that technique and you see it repeated over and over, you can generally kind of put that into context and run through the timeline of the cipher. So in my pages, some of them are a little bit past and kind of, present, juggling those sorts of elements. You get some that are basically from the original, Z340. You'll get some from the Z408. You also go back into the time period of the examination of the previous letters that showed up that kind of initiated those strings of attacks. So you got a very basic encryption system that's used, and it utilizes a certain kind of text that can be also shown to be seen in a slightly different altered light. So you'll have like a couple of words that are produced and a slight variance of the spelling of them will then produce a completely different context of the sentence. You see what I mean? Like it'll change the word's inflections. You see what I mean?
Right.
And when the words have a different meaning as to the way that they're presented, they leave it up to the interpretation of the other people that are picking up on it or reading about it, and they're basically playing everybody's intelligence, as like a bunch of dupes by using little simple tricks. So when you find those are called steganographic, hints or guides to, what's inside the letter. When you find those, you then go into a context of trying to figure out if there's a technical format for the cipher and try to put together some sort of transposition or substitution of alphabets or the key. So you take the text and then just run it through a simple system. Those are the easiest to make. Again, if you're dealing with somebody who has a degree of intelligence and is trying to kind of play upon that, they'll generally switch it up a little bit and leave the textbook foundation of it, but then add like an alteration of it. So you can recognize both parts, both the technical structure and the torque that they put on it.
Let me ask Patrick a question, because I'm curious. Patrick, I consider him my favorite polymath. Have you ever been involved with this type of thing, cryptography, Patrick? You seem to have that logical mind.
Not personally. It is a really interesting field. I was thinking of asking like how exactly this works now that we're in the age of AI. And another one of your commenters, Daniel Boone, said that they use computer algorithms to break code these days. So I'm wondering like I guess like two questions here. What's the main way that you fight human hubris and our temptations towards the superstitious? Because humans tend to, like, just saying this generally, we tend to see things in ways that we're already like kind of pre-programmed to see, or we're kind of like primed towards seeing things, and that can be very self-deceptive. And so maybe some ways around that, I guess what I'm asking is like, do you have rules? Like, are there government-based rules? Like, if you're to do this as a government agent, do they have a rule set to follow?
The only rule is basically as a cryptanalyst or somebody who's working as a cryptographer, that your job is basically to identify certain patterns that will bring about a physical structure and show the mechanics and the operations of the ciphers. Those are the basic elements and rules, the guidelines. And in order that's the scientific method of proving it as well, showing the physical, methods that were derived. It's not just kind of like, okay, this guy drew this curve on this line, so it means that he had a different angle of approach when he was scribing the letter and he was contemplating this in his mind. It's not a profiling of a suspect. It's a focus on the actual ciphertext and a focus on the structure and the process that you go through to actually produce a plain text. It's a very simple guideline. And the thing is, when you work outside that guideline, there are people that try and get creative online, and they've tried to throw out all those, esoteric, videos with, flash wave kind of, pulsing ciphers and stuff that you have to kind of stop the video and put it on slow-mo and say, what was that? It just blipped in a frame or something. There's all that sort of stuff going on online. Looking outside of that and saying, okay, what is the dictionary definition of this, and what is the actual historical timeline of the science behind it? Like where did all the mathematics come from? Where did all the where did the frequency examinations of the occurrence of letters and all kinds of different technical studies have been made to try and produce a very standard way of doing things.
Let me ask you something. Is there a quick test I could give? And I would share the screen to test what Patrick's talking about. Like, is there 2 or 3 or 4 lines of text that you could give me to give ChatGPT, and we could see? I could ask it to break to see if there is a hidden message and see what it says. I think that
It
would
seems
be
like that's what GPT is so bad right now. Like, it seems like that's what those programs are really struggling with now.
I was just curious because you and I, the reason I asked is Patrick is because I talked with him about this a little bit before the show, or maybe it was in the space, but I remember us talking about AI. But is there like a like a hello world for programmers? Is there like an easy, typical, couple of lines of text that I could test?
Just write something backwards and see if ChatGPT even recognizes that it's written backwards. You know what I mean? Like,
okay, so you cryptographers don't have like a hello world type thing that like a typical message or text that has hidden.
There's an anagrammer. Like you can get Scrabble anagrammers for people that play Scrabble. They literally have that, but you can use that for cryptography too. That's pretty cool. It's kind of like your Cracker Jack decoder ring that you get in your box of Cracker Jacks. Yeah.
So I'm going to do that. I'm going to share the screen, but go ahead. And the other question while I'm doing that, do you find that one thing that I'm always curious about when this happens is what if you get a letter from a criminal, a serial killer,
right,
and you find hidden messages in the letters, but then later, say in a court trial, the guy who wrote the letters claims that he didn't purposely put those messages in there. Do you find that sometimes that you find messages that weren't purposely put in the texts?
The thing is when you develop kind of like an eye for being able to, it's called word recognition. Like everyone recognizes a word. So if you got a matrix of text that's everywhere and you see a word pop up, you kind of look around and say, is that the only word that pops up? You see what I mean? So if you can't find like a consistent, like fluent, clear text message out of it, it's probably just coincidence. And it does happen, but I mean, think about it. You would need like 30 monkeys in a room on typewriters that have been typing for like 300,000 years, before they come up with something legible accidentally. Right? That's called the theory of infinity. That's the theory of infinity. But it could happen. But I mean, look at the odds of it is what the lesson is. The chances of that happening, it's 1 in a bajillion. That's why I was like, hey, I want to try and get these guys in the mathematics field to try and plot out the full odds of coincidence utilizing the different variable inputs that are available, and that'll give me like a clearer look when somebody says, oh yeah, I didn't know this, that's total coincidence. Yeah, we're not that smart. We can't figure something like that out, Well, the mafia have been doing it for years,
Oops, I had my. I forgot to speak. I forgot the talk feature was on my AI. You know what? I'm trying to get. I opened one tab to try to get one version of GPT to do the backwards thing, and then I'm going to flip
@bash cipher @bash,
and then but it just anyway. You all continue. I'm trying to get this to work, but it's not. I'm already seeing where AI is kind of weird because it's not doing what I ask it to do.
Well, I can see the utility of using humans for this more as well, because we've been doing deciphering fake signatures for many decades on like banknotes and all that kind of thing. When like we hire people that are good at learning the exact way a person writes, like the little inflections or like when they push down the page for this particular letter. And I could see that being involved in this as well. That's something that a machine would, I think, struggle with, at least at the current versions that we have.
Okay, here we go. Here's the test. Let's see.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Oops. What happened to my? There we go. Now let's see if I can get this. Let me move this out of the way.
You have to mirror it. You have to mirror the words too. It's like an image or something.
Well, I Okay, so the words are the sentence is backwards and the words are spelled backwards. So I'm going to put this in there. I'm going to put this in there, and then I'm going to say his friends looking.
Is that what it says? It's
You know what?
hard for
Let me
to
go
read it.
check. No, that's not what it originally.
His
See,
friends after-
if you try and use ChatGPT to solve a cipher and go online and try and print an article about it somewhere, be like, "Oh, I made a major breakthrough in the Zodiac ciphers with ChatGPT." No one's going to think, "Okay, you just pushed a button and then it solves it for you."
His
You know what I
friend,
mean? Like, no one's going to believe that, and it doesn't. It doesn't have that intelligence to do it. It's a very basic system right now. You know where it's at. It can do basic things, but you have to create parameters and direction. So you have like limitations that say, "Don't do this, do this." So it doesn't search through a bunch of crap that it picks up and say, "Oh, maybe it's this way," you know, or maybe it's this way. You just kind of like got to make it produce the answer.
that probably wasn't the best demonstration, but I mean, GPT, the large language models just predict words, right? I mean, there's no real.
Well, it's not just
not
prediction of
like
words.
Yeah.
It's symbol manipulation and working within various problem spaces, so they can change their functionality depending on what you're questioning them. And now that they're being added multimodality properties, they can kind of switch between multiple tasks and multiple ways of perceiving. So they work in a cognitive architecture is the word, and this is kind of what brains do, and also very different from what brains do because we do it conserving much less energy or using much less energy. And we kind of arrive at what John Vervaeke talks about as relevance realization. Like we're really snappy at arriving at what is the relevant information to what we're thinking of, and that's where we don't tend to hallucinate. Like we don't just kind of go off the rails unless we're intentionally lying. Systems, they accidentally lie because they don't realize what the actual relevant context is that they're searching for, unless they have more compute behind it. And this is where these things are getting much smarter. So it's not like they're just working within a text landscape. These systems have been put to use or they've been really tested with image recognition as well. So they'll show like an image of a row of 11 apples in a box, and like the first row is kind of like cut off half, so you only see half of the apples. And they tested, so Claude 3 and Copilot and ChatGPT all failed on that. I think Claude 3 got the best score on that after it was like prompted again, like please take a better look at this and then count the apples row by row, and it got it much better. And or just like it did much better with those kinds of tests, I should say. And there are other ways to test these systems too. Like you can have weird captchas, like they're solving captchas right now, and that's what worries me. And that's why I think this is kind of relevant to the cryptography idea here, is they are solving the kind of captchas that we have to solve that we think that they can't solve because we think that we're smarter than them. And we're able to like look at these really wonky looking letters and like drag the correct puzzle piece to complete the sentence or complete the letters in a row. I just saw something posted about this the other day. And so they are getting better. And I keep finding people saying like these systems won't be able to do this, and then they end up doing it. So I'm kind of like relinquishing my resistance on that idea as of late. I had one example I used, but it's a little bit questionable. Let me see if I can pull this up.
I mean, what I had it do, I had a one window. I asked it to write a short story, okay, in a few paragraphs. So now I'm going to say, this is just a random short story, right? So I'm going to paste it there and see. Okay. Text analysis. I wish you could see this. Breaker, it's going through, it's got bulleted lines and it's breaking down. It looks like something you would do, like where you're breaking down the lines, rows of text. And can you describe what it's doing? It looks like it's searching. It's analyzing the text. Okay, now it's broken it down into a list of words. and
4-0.
yes, 4-0.
Wow.
And she, the but one, she guided the suddenly as Elra, the possible hidden message. You all can't hear the, yeah, 'cause you can. And she, the but one, she guided the suddenly as Elara, the it, she determined not without there with the Elara. So that would be something then you would take and break it down even further if that was if that's what you gathered. Like I gave it like a it was 2 or 3 paragraph story. It broke those 2 or 3 paragraphs into line work. Right? I guess it's sentences. Is that right? And then it broke those down further, and then it broke it down into a list. Taking every 5th word is what it did. Okay, I get it now. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that. I just thought it was curious.
Here, I have one. Although this might be a little questionable, but it's quite relevant. Okay, you can probably understand what this says pretty quick. This is Neptune, by the way, though. It's not
Neptune for chicken for rooster. Parnet for hen. Parnet. Go ahead and say it.
Okay, so I tested this on ChatGPT, on Copilot, and Claude Opus 3. Claude Opus 3 did the best job. It got the prepare, or no, it didn't get prepare. ChatGPT got prepare. The other two didn't get that. But Claude identified this as Neptune and not Uranus. And then both of them get the whole, none of them got the whole message. But Claude also mistook the 4 for a 1 here, or it included a 4 and a 1. And you can kind of see this looks like a 1 in the center of this. Very distorted as well. It's a 4 on fire, so it's already kind of like what we see with captures. Like this is kind of what we
abstract for AI, right?
So they're getting there, though. Like the more that we test these systems, the better they do. Because
say what the you didn't decode it for us. What does it say? Prepare Neptune for what?
Let's see if anybody in the comment section can get it.
For okay, so culinary for hen, rooster, chicken.
It's cockerel.
Okay, see, you're talking to a farm boy, so I got my brain in the wrong place. I wish this is where we're failing. By the way, I don't know if everybody knows that we were having audio troubles, and that's why Breaker couldn't join us by video. So maybe we'll have you back again sometime when we can, because it would be fun because you could have probably broken that down pretty quickly.
I tried that one little cipher that you were running on the challenge. I thought that was cool. I had no idea what that was about. Are you going to reveal anything about that on the show?
I am. Let me remind people, in the description of the video, there's a text, 2 or 3 lines, and then you have to determine the cipher and then what the hidden message is. It's a little complicated, and that was developed by AI. That was the part of my show prep way back up here. So
I don't think you're going to get any message out of it. I looked for it, man. And to be honest with you, I think ChatGPT probably just came up with some weird like bifid cipher, or maybe is using like a specific count every letter sort of thing off, or but I don't know. The poem was cool. Like it was fluent. I was like, all right, well, if ChatGPT can write little stories like that, that's kind of cool. But it just had that weird kind of undertone to it. The owl flies at midnight or whatever, at the top of the tree. It sits at the top of the tree, that sort of thing. So I was just looking at it like, I don't really like ChatGPT very much. I've done some cool stuff with, trying to create like hilarious memes out of it. Like I did one meme and I was like, well, mix Bernie Sanders' picture with, from his college years with the Barefoot Intruder from Chicago that killed Valerie Percy. So I was like, just mix those two up real quick, and it came up with some really cool imagery. Just totally brought out like his inner kind of like demon side, that he was always holding his finger up in the air, pointing at the sky when he's talking, and just wants you to wear his little buttons all the time, that sort of thing. So he just kind of makes a really good suspect for being, he's got like a 10, 15-year window of his biography that's filled with like a void that no one talks about or even knows about. And he's just kind of like your average, everyday kind of guy, you know what I mean? Like, but at the same time, he's got like a really sinister side. And so we were talking about the Zodiac Killer, earlier, and I got kind of sidetracked on that because I wanted to just answer a few questions about my research work on that. I've actually gotten thumbs up on Facebook for my research from Vallejo Police Department on that one. And when I presented all my research work, and also in the Chicago area, I got a call back when I contacted the Cook County Courts, kind of a Blues Brothers operation sort of thing. And I dropped all the information on them while they were having a trial about a specific, politically inspired killing that went on back in the 60s called the Barefoot Intruder killings. And I ended up getting a call from the Vallejo, from the Kenilworth Police Department detective who's handling the case. Had about an hour or 2 long discussion, passed him a lot of information along, and just basically matched up a suspect for him. And, obviously he wasn't expecting, the individual that I had mentioned, but he was definitely very excited to see new breakthroughs being made in the case. And that sort of thing ties into the Zodiac because there was kind of like a series of, things that happened back in the day. And when they were, kind of in a timeline, you have the Chicago murders, and then the first killing of the Zodiac, which was the Cherry Joe Bates murder in Riverside. And so everybody kind of like latched onto that as being a potential, the first with the Cherry Joe Bates, they were like, oh, this is potentially a massive, tie-in to the Zodiac because there were letters signed with the letter Z at the bottom, but it didn't say Zodiac, it just said Z, And so it just put this little crook on the end of the Z and had a specific kind of design to it that was, its own moniker, the way it was drawn. And it was later replicated in the other letters. And he mentioned, the affairs going on there and the later letters in San Francisco. So it ends up just kind of tying in a even more previous timeline, even before Chicago, in a series of murders that were conducted by a suspect, a person of interest that was known as Sandy. And it's just this long line of, consistent patterns of events and affairs. They're all kind of made in the same time frame during a big heated political protest. The days of rage were going on in Chicago. There was the assassinations came after that of, Kennedy, then Martin Luther King, then the Zodiac starts right after Martin Luther King later that year, it's like a very consistent timeline of things that are going on. So you run into, just kind of quirks in the investigation. And the biggest one is how the media props up the actual fact that they think there's a lone individual that's involved in the Zodiac. And they just throw up one photo police composite sketch from, previous investigations. But when you look in the files and you go and actually do the research into the case, you find that there were actually 2 police profile sketch composites made of the suspects, and that there were 2 different suspects, one wearing glasses and the other just kind of looked like he was Eddie Munster, kind of like a Las Vegas version of an Eddie Munster, that sort of thing.
Let me ask you a quick question. I'm having this debate in the chat with Daniel. He's claiming that the Enigma, it was an Enigma machine, right? Was not broken until they found some code. But what did you say? What did he say? But from what I remember from the movie was that Alan Turing built that his Turing machine, basically a computer to break the code, which is true.
But see, here's the thing: it was first the Polish, but the Polish, it was basically the French resistance and French intelligence was able to, basically do some work. I think what it was they got access to some of the paperwork involved in the original, like their spies collected some stuff from some Germans they heisted, and then they sent it to Poland, and the Polish mathematicians actually did all the code breaking with the French. So after the code was broken, they then figured, hey, this is a machine, right, that's making them. Why don't we make a machine that breaks them? And that's where Alan Turing came in.
Right.
Yeah, ChatGPT says it came from Polish cryptographers in the early 1930s, but the season during World War II to encode military communications.
Turing developed his machine that you could place the codes into that would tell you what code to put back into the Enigma machine to break the code.
Yeah, it says particularly Turing's development of the bombe, an electromagnetic device designed to reduce the vast number of possible Enigma settings by exploiting known cribs or predictable parts of the message, such as weather reports.
They would change the setting on the Enigma machine every day, right? And that developed a different code every day. And so,
but the Enigma was based on the German military's communication systems, which had a specific design to them that had a signature. And that first signature at the top was usually dealing with like a weather report. And so they would send communications with a weather report, and they figured in those communications they had to have those signatures. So there you have, context like a date that you're looking for. You're looking for words or terms. It breaks everything down so you're easily able to limit your word selections to recognize. So you're narrowing everything down so quickly at that point. But that's basically how the Polish were able to start figuring things out by cribbing words, which means they selected a certain word that they knew sat in a certain position in the context of it.
But the Turing machine allowed them to quickly break the codes daily, because once they knew how the text were coded by the Enigma machine, they were able to quickly decode the Enigma machine by using the Turing machine.
Right, the bomb.
The what?
It's called the bomb, BOMBE. It was it's just a bunch of dials and wheels.
Right.
So it's basically like saying we're going to run every permutation there is possible.
Didn't they nickname it the Turing? Isn't that where we got the term the Turing machine? The Turing.
I've never heard of the Turing machine before. They just don't use the word bomb because it's so like imposing, and they don't want people like saying that word like bomb all the time.
I know there's a phrase in computing, the Turing test, right?
Yeah, it's like those sorts of things are basically derived from his studies, and he took a lot of different kinds of studies. So you got to kind of look at, you can't just take the Let Me Know video on the Enigma and the bomb and be like, oh, I can figure this all out. Like the best I've been able to figure out is it runs the possible permutations up to 10 to the 20th on an exponential.
So
I know that because I was born on 1020, and so like I kind of remember that, just kind of being like a ping, And when you run the mathematical computations of that, if they didn't have computers back then to run it. Now you could go to the decode.fr website, and they have an entire format of software developed for a 3, 4, and a 5-wheel Enigma machine. Because there was a 3 and a 4-wheel, and then there was an additional 5th wheel that they added on the side, which was like an added encryption wheel.
Yeah, the definition for Turing machine is a mathematical model of computation describing an abstract machine that manipulates symbols on a strip of tape according to a table of rules. and that was named after Alan Turing.
Yeah, they tried to develop, I guess you could say, some sort of stranded analysis, technique or something like that.
Those they started developing that his machine got smaller over the years. But well, that's interesting. What other stories? What's a good story to talk about? The fact. Well, I'm still curious. Like, do you all have like a Discord where all the code breakers meet and talk about what codes to break, or is that what the American Cryptogram? I keep wanting to say Cryptography Association. Is there like a a meetup where you all monthly where y'all break code? Or
well, they have an online Facebook discussion group, and it's just a board on Facebook, but it's a private group, so you can't really search and find it. And I guess you got to get the invite. It's not that they're like a very controlled group. It's just they don't make like a public outreach kind of effort. You see what I mean? So they want a think tank kind of mentality for all their members, because that's what they use to kind of get their discussions out. So you're not allowed to make any talks about politics. Like if you break a cipher and it relates to the biggest discovery in the world, and you bust all these politicians or whatever, they don't want to hear about it. They just want to hear about how you went through the actual methods to break it down, because they want to examine each type of encryption, because they maintain like an archives of study of the different types of things available. See what I mean? So if somebody tries to go off and do something, they'll basically have a record of it from some kind of archive. So the more content you're able to find, they just present it. And what you're looking at is mostly like classic cryptograms, which are like encrypted ciphers, but it's more like a wordplay game for those, and it works more like, I guess you could say, in a way that normal individuals can contemplate using their own intellectual capabilities with like pen and paper or pencil and paper. They're not like, it doesn't require like a massive quantum computing like analysis of frequency, and you don't have to see all the patterns changing over like a fluctuating period of like proposed decades or whatever it would take to run the process. And there's ways a code is meant to be broken. That's the one thing as a code breaker, is you keep that in your head, and you always say a code is meant to be broken, and don't present anything to the groups for a peer review to make yourself look like a complete ass. You know what I mean?
Let me ask you this. It just occurred to me, has anyone tried to play like 4D chess or whatever, where the coded message in itself is a coded message? Let's see. Then there's then it's are there layers?
4D chess works kind of in the crypto world like this. I'll drop a cipher, and then I'll disappear for 3 years, and then I'll drop another cipher, and then I'll basically say, go back and do that one, and then I'll wait another 3 years and drop another cipher. You see what I mean? And then I'll just kind of say, or maybe I'll drop 5 ciphers and then wait a year or two, and then say, out of all these 5, use these 3.
At some point, I can see though where if artificial intelligence does reach that point where it's, I don't know, AGI or whatever, where some people claim it will be basically conscious. But anyway, that's another debate. But you will have to come up with different methods for even fooling AI, right? Or you'll have to come up with methods that take it further than just decoding into one simple message, right? You would have to separate the messages somehow, by I don't know, geography.
Here's how AI works. It's only the smartest, the people that programmed it and created the program.
Well, at some point that won't be the case. Right.
That's how they're trying to stimulate everything, saying hypothetically we're going to get smarter one day.
Well, at some point, let's just, and Patrick has an opinion on this, I'm sure. At some point, AI will, if you take all of human knowledge and you're able to train it, right? The ideas that Einstein didn't have, or Patrick, or all of the ideas that haven't been crossed with each other, right, to check their polarity or whatever, that AI would be able to do that, right? AI would be able to take all the scientific papers and find the missing links between them, right?
It really seems like the question is compute power.
You still have to initiate. You would have to initiate something. It would still be human interface, and it would never take off and just come to itself. There's a point where you're saying at that last point where somebody initiates and hits a button that the computer is just going to start thinking on its own and take over, and Skynet's become self-aware.
Well,
is a hypothetical situation that can only be manifest by the actual structures that are programmed into the initial program.
We're only about 5 years away from that. Mark the date.
Yeah, right. That's so hypothetical to me. They're just trying to get money, man.
I'll be honest with you, man. I'll be honest with you. Okay, I've got a guy I'm working with right now to develop an AI app for construction. Okay, and what I have learned, what I have seen is from GPT-2 to 3 to 4 and then 5, it's nuts. It's crazy. It's really.
The worry that
actually loaded the old version of GPT-2 on my. I have it on this. This is a 4 terabyte hard drive right here, and it's on there. That's GPT.
Yeah, you can store the whole thing on a little.
And I'm running that on my local machine, right? And it's just not. The difference between that and 4.0 it's night and day, and that's only a few years.
I mean, the problem with assuming that it's not that the machines will just do this upon themselves. A lot of people are saying there's a quote going around. I'm not worried about the machines. I'm worried about the people. These machines have a lot of power, and it's how the people use them. You have to prompt them to do things. Of course, there's going to be nefarious people that want to prompt them to bring about Skynet. But it's if they have that power, if they're allowed that power. Now, when it comes to image recognition and what we're talking about with cryptography, there's this multimodality effect. And so there's a lot of overconfidence being put into multimodality and a lot of anthropomorphism in that as well, of course. But as we make more progress, we start to see how people are also in kind of a mechanistic nature in the way that we think and the way that we create and creatively express. So the whole idea of combining image recognition with text prompt and image prompt, like prompting the things to interpret what do you see in this image, what is this image about. There are many examples of where they fail and many examples where they succeed, and they seem to be getting better in a lot of context. They struggle with humor. That's one that's it seems more humanly relevant. And again, going back to the concept of relevance realization, humor is usually very nuanced, and it requires a lot of up-to-date thinking. Like you kind of have to follow a particular train of thought and then have an aha moment. And these systems seem to struggle with that a bit, but it's a combination of image recognition and text recognition and other factors. So the term is internal model, and we're able to keep an internal model in our head of the meaning of a thing. And so we're talking about meaning, not to get sidetracked, but symbolic representation and meaning structures. That's a very human way of conceiving and perceiving. And that's also how these machines are using their cognitive architecture, is to work with all these nodes and data points essentially. And those we can equate to symbols. We can equate meaning. It interprets meaning from that, and then it arrives at usually a correct answer from that by processing through various modes of perception, or various nodes of perception, I guess you could say. There's examples where we've seen. So they asked I think it was ChatGPT 3.5. Yoshibaka asked it to imagine I want you to try to imagine stacking a laptop and a bowling ball and a pencil and a pen on top of each other. How would you go about doing that, and in what order? And of course, it seemed to get it wrong at first, and then they basically said like, try again, think about it. And it was like, oh wait, you can't do this. This is not physically possible. You can't have, unless you were to like try to put the pen inside of the bowling balls, like thinking of exceptions and all that. But the idea there is that these objects can't be, like he was saying, align them vertically on top of each other, and it can't be done. And so for it to arrive at that conclusion, it has to have an internal model, and it has to like understand what it means for like what a laptop looks like and how it's oriented in 4D space. So how like specifically X, Y, and Z, and also how that would move over time. So that's kind of like an earlier example of this. I think this is like from late 2023 that they were doing that. Yeah.
But I mean, in reality, it's just a matter of training, right? Because it could be that what I found out was with this GPT-2, it hadn't been trained on certain things yet, right? So when I asked it how many square feet or is a sheet of plywood, it didn't know, but it knew what 4 times 8 was. It just didn't know what a sheet of plywood was. But now I can train it on I can get a data set for construction and train it, and it's fine. And that's
it's like and what that training consists of is you are essentially like it running the idea of plywood through multiple contexts. So it's like plywood is technically a flat sheet of compacted wood that can be used for this application and this application and this application. And so it adds up all those applications, and it starts to arrive at kind of a conclusion of what plywood is, which is very similar to how humans learn. We don't like to think that way, or we don't like to think that we think that way. But that's essentially how we teach people. Like, this is a pen, this is the pencil. Here's what you don't do with this. Here's what you do with this. That's nodes perception, and that's this term tokens. So, Tony, you might be familiar with this term, like token length. That's where we're really seeing the increase, because now when you add the compute to that, you can add more token lengths. And so a token is essentially like, it's not just words. It's like the cat, or that arrow, or the yard. You know what I'm saying? Like it can be a piece of conception, like a data point, essentially, that it can use as a node in its cognitive architecture to kind of like navigate a problem space.
But the other thing is too, it is just a language model. So I can train it. I can say question in brackets, right? Question, where's my thing? Question, how big is a sheet of plywood? Answer in brackets, 32 square feet. And it won't know that as long as you prompt it correctly in the future, right?
And it's crazy that, it's crazy that you can get that.
It understands language pretty much. But if I say, what is how thick is a sheet of plywood? Then I have to go back and say, question, how thick is it? You can literally put the number of questions and answers that you want, and it will later feed you those answers, but it won't necessarily understand. It might take me doing that 100 times for those neural networks, like you're saying, the nodes or whatever, right, to cross-reference and learn about plywood, right?
Well, yeah, it's kind of like the way that I seem to understand how these things are understanding is they're working with these objects and manipulating them in these 4-dimensional spaces. So a good example is like the Minecraft experiment, where they had it work in Minecraft, and they just ran it, like they trained it on Minecraft, and it was able to give a tutorial to a new player and teach the player how to play Minecraft, just completely learning on its own. Kind of like what we saw with AlphaGo. Like AlphaGo, there was no language involved in that, or Alpha Blue, where we saw like the chess masters, the best chess masters in the world, being defeated, and then the best Go players being defeated. They're just being trained on this context, and so that's called narrow AI, because they're narrowing down on that one particular task they're very good at. Now what we're seeing is this multimodality, where you can ask it to indeed be a master at Go, be a master at chess, and also be a physician, and also act as a therapist, and also solve your homework and do your essays for you, and all these other activities. And it will remember that, and that's the other major property. Like, it's like we're piecing together pieces of the brain here. We can attach this essentially memory function to, so it remembers all that you've trained it on. and then it starts to kind of look more like what a human does.
One thing I've learned through my little experiment is that you can get you can get language models that are relatively small. Like I started out with like a 500 megabyte one, right? I found out it wasn't very smart because it was the data sets that had been trained on were limited. But then you can go to GitHub or Hugging Face and download data sets that are and this is what companies are doing. They're developing their own data set, proprietary data sets, and they're training a basic model with it, right? This is how you get proprietary models for business, because businesses aren't going to want their. I'm sorry, I'm getting off the subject here a little bit, but how does all this relate? So you all on your forum don't have a discussion about, oh my God, we're going to worry about AI breaker.
No, everybody looked into it and was like, hey, this is the worst thing on planet Earth for trying to think, like. And then I just ran a few tests myself, and I was like, the results it gave me, and that's the thing. I had published my results, right? And so ChatGPT had mentioned up to a certain time point, it was collecting data from the internet in its archives that it plays off of, right? For sourcing material. So I did two things. I said, all right, well, I already knew one of the ciphers, the way it broke of the Zodiac, and I was like, go ahead and use this type of method and create a, break in the cipher using a shift in a Vigneri tableau, a vertical shift with a key phrase. And you couldn't even produce it. And then I was like trying to direct it, to put limitations on it and say, no, follow it exactly in this manner, and to see if it responded. And it just kind of came up with the most erroneous version of things, kind of touched on the topic of what I had already told it was. And they just kind of like turned around and blew it into its own kind of, it just started to create like a fluent poetry of some kind. You know what I mean? Like it had like a poetic effect and a theme to it. Its own inflection, and it took everything out of context of what was being talked about both in the cipher and in the plain text that I had already broken. And I just wanted to test the function of it as a cryptographer, say, hey, maybe this can be a useful tool for simple tasks. But okay, so the only thing I've ever gotten out of ChatGPT is when I was breaking the Beal ciphers, the numbers in the Beal are supposedly a book code. So it's got really high numbers, and you're supposed to just, number the words in a certain book, and whatever the cipher's number is that number in the word, or is that word in the book. So you're looking at this whole entire context of, trying to juggle up to 2906, and I'm not like looking through every book and planning to number them, just to test, the cipher and see what I got. But that was the only thing that you could do to follow their directions. Now, if you knew what was going on and you looked at that number and said, that's a pretty high number, 2906 is pretty high, I bet what they're doing is just using a numerical alphabet from 1 to 26, but then the next one is 27 to 52, and on and on and on until it climbs to 2906. And so I take the theory and I say, okay, ChatGPT, give me a series of ascending alphabets numbered from 1 to 27 for the first, and I just start putting the limitations into it, and it spits it out perfectly. And I say to myself, all right, now there's like a really functional use for, like a program. You can just enter a few words into it and it'll give you the results. And so I took that alphabet, and that's what I learned to solve that's how I solved the Beal papers, which I'm now in a Popular Mechanics article. It's coming out in Popular Mechanics at the end of this month.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I've had 2 interviews with the former editor, and they assigned him the task. Like I had an interview before, but the lady got too busy on her other projects, so they put the big bad boy on it. And now we have one more interview, and he's giving me like a bio intro kind of thing, just kind of do that segment for the article. But it's literally all going to be about me and the guy that broke the ciphers, because I literally am now in possession of the gold mines that they once used in Arizona. and I have an official claim in the Department of the Interior and the BLM in Arizona, because I'm like out here in Arizona, like filming, like I'm literally like out here taking photos and documenting this huge series of gold mines that I found on 2 different trails with all the maps that I found. And they're really majestic too, because they have all these beautiful ornate rock carvings everywhere. And it's like a rock art gallery, to be honest with you. And the caves are all designed, like one is a heart-shaped cave with a muser face on the outside, like, so it's like a happy experience, if you've gone through a long desert hike, and there's just like all these winding, meandering trails that branch off from like a Spanish camp and a rostra at the base, and really cool stuff that nobody even knew existed. So I'm doing that because the last mine on the trail is the fabled Lost Dutchman. And I basically just made videos, put together interviews and stuff. I have a couple podcasts, one with Yuma, Arizona's 92.8, and you can find those online on YouTube. And then I've also got my own Solving the Beale Papers, or Solving Beale Papers.
Let me ask you,
on Facebook.
Beale Papers, is that BEELE or BEA?
BEA?
BEALE.
Yeah.
And those were about, I'm sorry, I was trying to do something in the background. What are those papers about?
There was some good old boys named Rockefeller and Morgan. J.D. Rockefeller and J.D. Morgan hired a guy named James Revis and told him to go down to Virginia and get 30 men and put together a mining operation to go out west. When they got out west, they went through and they were mining in Arizona, but it was the only thing that was going on. It was during a time of the Peralta land grab, where James Revis presented a fraudulent forged document from the Kingdom of Spain, claiming that he was entitled to the entire, from the west side of Phoenix all the way into New Mexico, on like this strip of property that he claimed was his original grant. And he was literally like trying to take possession of like so much land and call it his.
Right, but
and
where?
1880. So after they were done, they made a bunch of money real quick and tried to get everyone to pay them their taxes and everything to them. And he turned around and split. They killed their 30 men, and then he made the Beale Papers and dropped it as a pamphlet where it all began.
But you're saying he purposely placed code in there in the.
And he said, wait 10 years and then break the code and then go get the money.
Okay. See, I'm trying to figure out if in every case, if the code was placed purposely in the papers or the text, or are code breakers finding it arbitrarily.
Right. The Beale was intentional, and it said there are 3 ciphers that were in a box, and in the box was a copy of the Declaration of Independence. And a guy actually found the box, and the Declaration of Independence had a little leather pouch with an like a piece of like a bifocal optic, just a piece of glass from glasses, and it also had like a key in it. And then there was a folded up copy of one of Thomas Jefferson's edits of the Declaration of Independence.
This was in like a time capsule?
It was in a box, like a cleared box, almost looked like a little treasure jewelry box.
And that was hidden somewhere?
Had a false bottom to it, and one guy had gone to a yard sale in
no way.
In Pennsylvania, and he had found it. They had it in their garage as like a trinket, because they liked it, and it was just stacked on one shelf. So when they went to clean the place out, he tosses the box in the trash because they were going to throw it out, and the side of it broke, and he noticed that there was like a little a little treasure chest inside of it that he never knew existed. And that's how that guy's been on TV with that Declaration of Independence, but he's gone to the length of finding an actual map. Like the Declaration serves as a master map to numerous KGC, Confederate States of America, Knights of the Golden Circle depositories that are buried in Virginia.
But again,
so it acts as a map, but he has basically gone and checked them out, and he finds that his are all empty. Now,
My question is, let me give me a chance to jump in sometimes.
yeah,
My question though, in that case, was did someone create the map out of creating a code from the Declaration of Independence, or was it purposely put there?
it just went. They singed 2 holes in it, and the 2 holes looked like lakes. Then they cut the top edge of it so it looked like a ridge line in the proximity of where it was. And then they erased and edited a bunch of different locations in the Declaration where they just took an eraser and just kind of etched it out, right?
Because one of the problems that John Nash had, right, was that he was just picking article when he was suffering from his schizophrenia or whatever. He was we lost Patrick. He was just looking through random articles and finding codes that weren't necessarily supposed to be there, right? I mean, what I was saying, Patrick, was that John Nash, one of the issues he ran into was that he was trying to find codes and publications that weren't there, and he was creating his own results due to his schizophrenia, right? So
when was this? I never heard about that.
Well, I mean, it's part of the. I guess if you're saying the movie is incorrect, I guess you could say that. But
sounds like the National Treasure, or the movie National Treasure with Cage.
Well, no, I'm just saying that John Nash had schizophrenia, right? That's a true story, right?
Schizophrenia means split frontal lobe. I don't know. I've never seen the inside of his cerebral cortex before.
Well, okay, I haven't either. But there are symptoms.
Let's be literal here. He's a lot smarter than Hollywood.
It's not a criticism, dude.
I know. I'm joking.
There are clinical, right? Patrick knows that.
Of course. There's different degrees of your own fantasy, your own imagination. I know exactly what you're saying.
The only reason I brought it up is because it made me wonder how many of these ciphers are we creating on our own, and how many were purposely put there. That's all I'm asking.
Well, these are historical. 1885. The publication was made in the Library of Congress. It's dated there. There's also original copies of it in the Bedford Museum in Virginia. That's the Beale Bedford kind of thing. And there's like literally dozens of links online. I even got a peer review about my research from a guy named Ron Gervais, who's a huge cryptologist. He's a computer programmer who's worked on the Beale for like 20 years. And he knows all the guys in the NSA, and he hosts a website with like a collection of the best attempts at breaking the Beale. He's kind of the go-to guy to archive stuff. So when I sent him my stuff, he put up a slot for me, and he basically he wrote a comment. He said, in the last 20 years of research, I find that this is the most practical, that has produced the most out of any of the methods that have been tried. What you're saying is holding true at that point, because the majority of the other ones are just running off on so many different fantastic methods of decryption that even guys in the NSA were trying to do that.
Let me ask Patrick, so I don't misquote anything. Wasn't he diagnosed with schizophrenia, or is that just something the people who made the movie made up?
Who are you talking about?
John Nash.
Was that the dude that Nicolas Cage was playing?
No, that was
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry.
It's A Beautiful Mind movie. With
I think it was
John Nash. I mean, he did win the Nobel Prize. I'm not criticizing him.
Yeah, no, you're right. He won the Nobel Prize. I think it was schizophrenia. It was very severe, a very severe dissociative disorder like that of some kind.
Before he was started taking medication for schizophrenia. This is according to the movie. I haven't read any books about it, but according to the movie, he before he was diagnosed, he was finding codes in publications that weren't placed there. He was creating the cipher and the code, and
right.
And so, honestly, the reason I brought that up is that it kind of gives people the impression that, and I have a high functioning autistic daughter, right? So she would be somebody who would do something like that. It kind of made me wonder. It kind of always makes me wonder about these codes. Are we?
You should see what Ashton said about them.
What?
It literally exposes everything Ashton's all about.
See, I'm trying to be
UFO club,
Yeah, I'm trying to ask in a reasonable and respectful way, right? I don't even know what Ashton said, and I probably don't want to really hear his content on my show, but because it's kind of disgusting to me, to be honest with you. But I guess my point is that most people like you who do this are smart enough to take a publication and create a hidden message and a cipher to create the scenario, right? I mean,
let me explain this. Originally, there were a group of men who were Freemasons, right? And those individuals were a part of, the original local economy and everything, and they knew all the typesetting guys, right? And when they were putting together things like, the Liberty Bell, they were, hammering rivets into a supposed crack. That was, they were trying to bind the crack, with like 2 rivets. They put a bunch of imprints on the outside of it that made kind of like shaped an outline of like a mountain ridge or, that sort of thing. And you just kind of look at that whole thing and it just has 2 words on it. It says pass and stow. So you're saying, okay, well, maybe that's John Pass and John Stowe, the 2 guys that made the bell. And I'll just say to myself, okay, or maybe there's a mountain pass in Stowe, Vermont, where I found a vault 150 feet off the ground. And the end result is always the confirmation or the debunk. Like if you go through a code and you're proposing this is the outcome, it's going to do the same. It's going to go all the way through it and produce the outcome, and then you can run it backwards to the process and it'll produce the original. If you can't do that, then you got some kind of glitch in the computer program and it's not doing the interpretations right or something like that. So you trust in your traditional methodologies when you're breaking codes. Now, there's something in typesetting from back in the day called an Old English box cipher. And they're very cleverly created. And again, it relates to the word selection and the positioning of the letters in the sentences in relation to lines above, below, to the side, diagonally, or left and right. So you can only connect and tie together by the rules those individual letters. And if those letters block in a certain way and produces one coincidental word, throughout 3 or 4 lines with a block of 2 or 3 letters on each, you're looking at a potential, I guess you could say, like a quirk in just typesetting, right? So typesetters are, in the old way, are taught to move and utilize words that don't do that, or lines and positioning of their strikes on the paper, so that way it doesn't actually leave any kind of additional mark or demarcation.
You just gave me
they know about these things. So they used to play upon people's perception, and one of the types of plays upon the perception of interpretation was called a Purser code. So they would write a letter, and the most basic Purser code is the inflection method. So that means whatever words you select create a certain inflection, but the words themselves can hold a dual meaning. You see? And so by utilizing the alternate meanings of them, you can compose the sentences so that way they hold a general undertone to them of what you're talking about. Say you and me talked about something in the past, but we're writing in a generic format to each other. That sort of inflection is there because we're talking about that subject of something we dealt with in the past. So now you're looking at different types of advancement of that concept, moving into the actual embedding of physical messages into the actual positioning of those words in the selection of them. And it looks just like a normal letter would. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, as these ciphers are created, they put context of design into them, which means they create a physical structure of them so they can either create a path through the cipher. They're not just picking random words out at selection and blocking them in. One of the blocks will then tie to the next block, which then ties to the next block and ties to the next. And it carries on throughout multiple layers of it. And at times, these have become so advanced of a degree of intelligence that they were able to position themselves in a graph paper. The blocks, as they were read, the stenos were lined out and would produce even another cipher out of those positions. So there's been a two-step process of a breakdown that I found. I found multiple layered ciphers that have, from, times of Francis Bacon's, trip to the Oak Island money pit where he buried a stone slab and it had just a series of seven symbols on them. So the objective is, if you can break it and it breaks that way and it has an end result to it that is consistent with additional ciphers that are broken, it then holds for a longer and more complex and more intentional message because it defies the odds of coincidence. And that's the only scientific method there is.
What kind of
it's proof of concept. That's all.
What kind of projects are you working on? Do you have like ongoing projects now that you're working on that you can talk about, or?
Well, I mean, you don't want to talk about bad things that have happened, like, planes falling out of the sky or submarines disappearing.
I mean, you gotta. Okay, submarines disappearing is okay, but
no, it's not, because it's the same thing, and it's a really bad.
I don't mean it's okay. That was a bad. That was a bad. I just meant I don't want to talk about stories that like I've been involved with that we've already easily debunked. So I don't want to, I'm not going to promote those stories. I think I know what you're talking about. But I'm talking
giant squid,
what? I'm talking about
giant squid attacking, like that sort of thing.
No, I guess we're not talking about the same one.
No, Project Architeuthis. Architeuthis is a giant squid. So when I say a giant squid attacking, you've seen that show Squid Games before, obviously.
All right.
Is that something you're working on now?
Oh, it's a constant, ongoing thing. There's 15 ciphertext blocks that have been found online, and nobody knows what they mean. Hint, hint. I whip it out. It forms like a disposition matrix, and it blocks in like 50. Each one of the sheets has like 50 or 60 different variable ways that it can be blocked out. And the way you do it is you identify keywords and names of people. And so, like, it's like the Deadpool list. You know what I'm saying? It's like really bad. Really bad stuff.
In that example, did someone say we're producing hidden messages in this text, or are you just assuming it's there?
Oh no! One of them says Q to examine Architeuthis bottles. So there's a series of.
I'm saying the author of the.
Oh yeah, there's a clear author in mind of all these.
But the author of the content says we've purposely placed hidden messages in this content, or are you just some coders came up with a cipher?
Okay. Here's how it started. 2014, the project was launched. 2010, the disposition matrix legislature was signed, which authorized them to do this. So 2014, they came up with an ARG and went online and tried to attract cryptographers to recruit them. They were running a feeler operation to see what the feasibility was of executing this operation without anybody finding out what they were doing.
Wait. What did you say? Some kind of legislation was passed for what?
It's called the disposition matrix legislature.
When was that? That you mean in our Congress of the United States?
2010, that was signed into being.
Well, boy, Heidi, that's what my grandmother used to say when she didn't know something. Boy howdy, what was that? What's that all about?
Howdy.
Boy howdy, what the heck? I haven't heard of that. What? Why did they pass that legislation?
You're gonna say you can't just produce, kill lists and be able to get away with it.
Oh, we're talking. Oh, this goes to the okay.
They wanted to be more open. They wanted to be more open about it with the general public. So you got that little cringe kind of feeling like when you started seeing things manifesting. That's what all the preemptive bullshit on TV that people talk about is.
Does that legislation say? Does it deal with cryptography, or does it just deal with the subject matter?
The Architectus is a basic. I guess you can say it's an ARG, which is an active role-playing game. The way they set it up was they had a field of people that worked inside their, promotions crew that they hired to run it, and it was to try and create like a real-world operation of like like a military kind of thing going on. But the people were tasked with, being observers and being able to it was kind of like a social experiment.
This game was named in the legislation.
No, this came about officially sponsored by the U.S. Navy as a recruitment tool for cryptographers in 2014.
That's what I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to link it back to an official source.
2010, you have a disposition matrix. A matrix is just a bunch of letters in a grid. That's what a matrix technically is. It's just a bunch of letters in a grid, a block of text. That's it. So you go into, but it's a disposition, which means it's like they got a problem with these people. See what I mean? So that's where it comes about.
Are you saying this matrix was published with the legislation, or the legislation was just an intent to deal with the terrorist, or what was the disposition? What was the legislation?
The declarations were one thing, but it allowed for another thing to happen.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get to.
Listen, all the media went online and was like, hey, where are all these lists that they keep talking about, that they put together official lists, right? So they tried to Freedom of Information Act it. The media was all over it. They kept talking about it, and that phrase, that pings, disposition matrix, you go look it up on YouTube, and there's like so many videos on it. I was taken back when I discovered it was all tied to the legislation.
But the military didn't purposely release. The military purposely built this into the game, or people are just assuming it's part of the game?
I'm the only person to be able to break a clear text out of it to show actual real world events that were going on. And I also located all the ciphers that were involved in their mix.
Okay.
Now, let me run you through the
Patrick?
No, I'm still here.
Okay. I just want to make sure you were still hearing.
I'm working on my camera. Having issues.
You start in 2014 with the announcement, hey, we're going to start this game. And then in 2016, you get the first cipher from WikiLeaks. And then in 2018, you get like 6 ciphers in a game called Quest of Random Clues and Mythic Airplanes. Those were the hashtags that they were put.
So WikiLeaks released ciphers for this purpose?
That's correct.
Wow. Okay. So what I'm trying to do is link this to. The reason I'm trying to link this to official sources is because you have so many people, and I actually had people tell me this before the show. Oh, this is
Mythic Airplanes.
They're just these smart. They're a bunch of smart guys. They're really intelligent, and they're creating ciphers that produce hidden messages that weren't purposely put there. And what I'm trying to demonstrate is that there are official sources. I mean, WikiLeaks was pretty dependable as far as their.
Julian Assange was touted as originally in his earliest of articles before all this started. His resume says he is a cryptographer.
Yeah. Okay. So when I heard WikiLeaks, I was happier about.
It doesn't say he's a computer programmer, because he didn't build all those computers that house and database all this stuff. He didn't build any of that. He's just a cryptographer.
Yeah.
And he calls himself a journalist. So, boom, on their 15th birthday party, they celebrate and say, here's a challenge for everybody. Let's go ahead and try and break the cipher in a game. Right? WikiLeaks is doing this. And this is after like all their assets have been like, you know what I'm saying? This is before he's in the embassy.
And they mentioned the ARG that you were talking about in the WikiLeaks.
Yes, in context, because what they did, which was so ingenious, was they took a Tor browser cipher, an onion code, right? And they're like, okay, click this link and it'll take you to a picture. And this is just an encrypted way of, you know, going in a Tor browser. Okay. So everyone did it. And then they were like, oh, it comes up with this picture of an airport, Dublin Airport or whatever, you know, or, you know, Belfast Airport or something like that. So they're just like, you know, on a quest of random clues that this guy is literally, they're spitting out one after the next. And now the Project Architeuthis thing went for 18 days straight, where there was a supposed cryptographer that was a stowaway on a submarine that had been hijacked, and she was sending out signals, and you were tasked with finding the submarine, right? This was planned in 2014. And in 2017.
And who said that she was releasing messages?
The U.S. Navy set up an ARG to make sure that the actual process was following this lady named Maria Sosposa.
What was the ARG?
And the ARG was just a game. It was kind of like, okay, we're trying to save the day. There's a hijacked sub. And
I was asking for the name of it.
The ARG is called Project Architeuthis.
Oh, it's the same. Okay, I thought you were referring to a different ARG.
No, the ARG is an active role-playing game.
No, I know, but I thought you were referring to another one at this point. The other, yeah.
No, so in the context of the whole operation that they proposed, it went over 18 days, and you constantly were fed different ciphers, and all they were doing is creating different types of ciphers, saying, oh, let's see what the audience can figure out. Like, which ciphers can we use and get away with it? Which ciphers will they figure out? You know, that sort of thing. So that's the goal of the U.S. Navy when they're making an appeal, because they're an intelligence organization. That's just what they do. So you're looking at an operation set up there in 2014. Then ciphers show up in 2013, are found floating in bottles in the Ulster in Hamburg, Germany, a river that turns to a lake in Hamburg. And there was a huge website made, or a huge article that was made in both German and in English on a Science Brains website or something like that. I think it's called cipherbrains.com or something like that. And it's this guy Klaus Schmidt's Cipher Archive, that sort of thing, where he has a discussion board about things, because he's like a super pro cryptographer with publications and books and stuff. And so, anyways, this guy documented the discovery of all of these bottles, because people kept finding them. And inside the bottle was like a weird cipher. Like, it was all hand drawn, and it just looked like a bunch of flight plans, radio signals, like flight control symbols, like just really weird things, like, you know, little dials on the airplanes, like, you know, kind of control board, you know, with like all the radio signatures and stuff like that. And it just had a bunch of, you know, things that were just kind of, you know, blocked in here, or a huge body of text here. One of them had like a weird window that was cut out from the inside. It was kind of like a hardback of the back of a softback, you know, book of some kind. And he just wrote all the ciphers on the back of it. There were different kinds, right? And he had stuffed them all into these bottles, whoever it was, and threw them into the lake. And they were literally like found one after the next, until 10 of them were found in 2014. And so that began the kind of the SOS message in the bottle thing in this real world operation. Then 2014 moves to 2016, and WikiLeaks releases the first of a series of ciphers. And they did so over 4 days. And the only 4 tweets they made in those 4 days each had one misspelling. And the words were taken out and examined. It said Whopper Intelligence Recipe Presumptive Algorithm.
Huh.
And then you worked over into another...
Which word was misspelled?
In each one of the tweets over 4 days, one word was misspelled in the tweet,
Oh, I didn't know if you knew which words they were.
Whopper, intelligence, recipe.
Oh, you said the words. Yeah, okay.
Presumptive algorithm. Now, if you go look at the Architeuthis, that sort of format, they release slides over one of the days, and they give 6 words, which is like, something limpet, turned, like it's 6 words that are 6 letters long. And then in 2016, WikiLeaks releases his that say Whopper intelligence recipe presumptive algorithm. And so that begins the algorithm. Do you remember hearing like, oh, YouTube's got an algorithm, or that chatter online? Oh, I got to try and get away from the algorithm. That sort of thing.
You mean like a meme, like algorithm became a meme or something?
Yeah, like it means that something's going on inside the industry, and taking names and numbers of people.
Do you know what he was referring to, Patrick?
No, I think it's pretty amusing though. the words they chose to misspell, kind of interesting.
You wonder, how do you misspell Whopper? Did you just spell it with 1 P or something?
Well, maybe without. How is a burger? How does a burger work? It's a Whopper.
I know.
WHOPPER, but they spelled it WOPPER. So what's a burger? It's a message in a bottle in Hamburg. It's a big nothing hamburger, they say.
A nothing burger.
So
nothing burger.
Don't pay attention to it. It doesn't have anything to do with what's going on.
Huh.
See what I mean?
Well, I'm trying to figure out a way to wind down the show a little bit. What kind of, with all of this discussion about AI, I wonder what kind of, how do you inspire young people to get into cryptography? I wonder if is there a purpose for that now, or do they just become prompt engineers?
kids do it all the time. They do crosswords, they do word jumbles, they do, you know what I mean? That's like a word jumble is a transposition where everything's switched around, or an anagram. And at the crossword teaches you basic common base text signatures of words that you can use that intercede. So one's written vertical, one's written horizontal. That's the basic element that's involved in generating an Old English box cipher. So those 2 elements that you were picked up on, that you used all throughout your life as like little word games and stuff like that, that was to spark your intelligence level in cryptography. And they have basic influences, which is cool, because then you get into like other things like word games, or like, find the hidden words inside of like a huge, like word jumble or something like that. That sort of thing.
I just wonder, are there going to be what types of
word search kind of
types of what types of other occupations does this type of work lead to? I guess you end up getting recruited by the CIA or the other intelligence agencies, or have you ever been approached? That reminds me to ask you: have you ever been approached to recruit?
So the other day there was this guy on a discussion board, and we were just chatting about ciphers, right? And he shows up and he's like, "Oh, I've got a guy at the NSA that I know. I could just pass your details to, or whatever." I was like, "No." I was like, "If he sees it and wants to approach me, he will." So, but this guy, I didn't even know who he was, and he was kind of degrading in a conversation where he was challenging my intelligence, and I had to kind of like overprove myself to say, "Hey, look, you don't even know the half of it," that sort of thing. And I don't like having to do that. I just like people reading what I write and then just asking questions, and I just try and fill them in, but a lot of people get so weird and argumentative, and I try and bring that pareidolia, thing into it, like, oh, you're seeing something that's not there. I was like, of course, it's called the art of concealment. You have to kind of explain to them there's like I was like, you read the Bible. Did you understand half of what was in it? Like, obviously that whole entire thing was built by, a mathematical genius who was a master encryption specialist for the kingdom. And he dealt with all the secret correspondences of King James and King Elizabeth. I mean, his name is fucking Francis Bacon. He wrote the book Advancement of Learning. So at a certain point, you throw references out, and people just don't want to even look at it. Like, oh, why should I have to verify this? I've already tried to deny it exists, So I don't even deal with that anymore. Like, I just brush that aside and be like, there's no purpose in trying to convince somebody who's so ultimately, wholehearted decided that there's no possible way that this could happen. But they just don't. They don't want to even see it.
I think you just have to be patient with people because.
Oh no, I'm patient. I am very patient with a lot of honest people, but they come at you. They come at you with shit like, with stuff like take your meds. Oh, this one is on meth. Oh, you escaped the institute. How are we gonna catch this guy? Oh, let's try and dox this guy. Just like the weirdest kind of little LARPs going on inside the internet. And you come to find out that there's people that are kind of stationed in different places. And when you release something that's specifically about one of their favorite things to promote, they'll try and kind of knock you either way, whether or not they're being honest or not. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
They'll try and promote one publication or try and promote a favorite sort of, entity in the media or, they'll immediately go into defense of their own, like half of them voted for all this crap to happen. And now they're like, oh, I can't believe they're attacking us. What are you doing? And we're like, well, they've been doing this for years. You know what I mean? Like,
what I have found is I have several friends who are sort of, now, how do I say this? I'm not saying all code breakers have Asperger's, okay? I'm saying I know a few people with Asperger's who could do this. I
stopped eating red meat.
What's that?
I stopped eating red meat. I don't like Asperger's anymore.
Asperger's. they could do this type of work. I think this is what happens to people who don't give these people a break, right? Those types of people can do that type of work, but they're misunderstood for the most part. And that's the reason I use those two guys is because I can ask one of them, get some GPS coordinate, how deep is the ocean, and he could probably get it within a couple of feet or something. But he doesn't. He has very few social skills, right? So what I'm trying to say is that I think people with this kind of mind are very intelligent, and so they get a certain amount of pushback because they're on a spectrum that's a little bit higher than your average person, and I, as a matter of fact, I had one friend growing up who accidentally hurt himself and he's dead. He died from and it was part of his problems was the emotional thing that he went through by being picked on all the time because he was so smart with this type of thing. And
that's crazy.
The reason
I can understand people picking on. When you talked about John Nash, that's a perfect example of from what I gathered from the whole thing. There's a certain echelon of Princeton that was at that time tied to like trying to get all the military contracts and promote themselves as being the most intelligent. Because they were trying in a business plot to try and network together with other Ivy League guys to kind of be the go-to guys that the government was going to hire out of college. So Nash was seen like, oh, he doesn't fit into that genre of people. He's that much smarter. So they tried to kind of get him and be like, hey, we're going to force you to take some insulin therapy. And now they talked about that in the movie, which was just the most, it's like a chemical abuse. It's like a torture of chemicals inside the body. And to hit somebody with that kind of manipulation, it causes mad problems.
That's why I kind of brought up.
Down the line.
That's why I kind of brought up John Nash in the beginning, is because he went through the same experience that one of my friends did when I was in high school, and it was really sad, that your average person can't handle, even sometimes communicating with these people, and so
yeah.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Do you mind if I read a quote? I was actually reading something very relevant to this recently. There's a book I'm reading called The Meaning of Madness by Neil Burden. He quotes Edgar Allan Poe in this. So in his semi-autobiographical short story Eleonora, Edgar Allan Poe writes, "I come of a race noted for vigor of fancy and ardor of passion. Men have called me mad, but the question is not yet settled whether madness is or is not of the loftiest intelligence. Much that is glorious, whether all that is profound, does not spring from diseases of thought, from moods of mind exalted at the expense of the general intellect. They who dream by day are cognizant of many things which escape those who dream only by night."
Oh, I like the last part.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that one. The gold bug. He goes, T is an O, T is an El Dorado. That's what I named. That's how I named my company, from one of the ciphers I broke from Poe. If you go look at the secret mission, it's called A Secret Mission for the King, and it's got a website page on Facebook. Secret Mission, the number 4 and the word King. That's what you enter in, and you get that. But the Secret Mission for the King is really cool because you find out that it was such a famous place that they kept it really hidden for a while. But a lot of really important people were given parts of the great mystery to kind of write about. And so Poe's involvement happens to be in the inclusion of a cipher that's at the end of it. And it instructs you in how to find an actual trail that leads you to the base of this cliff where the vault is situated. And you see all the symbolisms that is drawn into his book as if he was there himself. And he just says that one phrase, T is an O, T is an El Dorado. And I've shown you, Tony, I've shown you that rock. Remember, you put that rock up from the, that's Vermont, man.
I was trying to find the catamount. I kind of vaguely see it, but explain.
Well, you can see the mountain, which kind of has a line that looks like it's darkened and cut through it.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
So it's kind of like a trail up and through a valley at the base of a mountain, and that's what you're looking for. And symbolically, you've got that to go on, but then you've also got the image of the cat that is sitting there, and it's just, you see the jowls. It's a side view of the cat. It's literally what a catamount or a mountain lion would look like. And when I found that rock, I was at the base of where the trail leads up through the ridge, and I was tracking different veins of gold and silver deposits that I found in Vermont, because we just go fishing out there all the time. And when I seen some of these silver dollar rocks, I was like, man, there's a whole entire creek bed full of these going all the way up. I was like, I bet you could get some silver out of it. And then I started researching more about Spanish history of mining in Vermont, and they were there in like the late 1500s, and then passed it on to the French, when they came through, and they just moved out to the Southwest. And that's pretty much part of the whole original exploration. And, what they were trying to do is generate money so they could build, whatever small settlements that they could set up and stuff like that. It was pretty intriguing. And I found the actual trails of the gold mines in Vermont. So there's like a succession of them. And there's like 4 main centers where they're operating both gold and silver. The majority of it's silver. There's like 2 places that are just wholly silver, and one that is silver and gold, and the other one is more gold than it is silver, but there's still a lot of silver there. And that's when you get to the highest point in the valley. And so that rock that I'm holding in my hand, it didn't really look like the other rocks that were there. Right? They were all darkened schist.
It almost really looked like fool's gold or something. What's the...
Well, I've never seen fool's gold looking that enriched.
I know. I was just kidding. I was kidding.
But here's the thing. You're going fishing, walking a railroad, and you see a pile of rocks on the side, and on top of it is one rock. Yeah. And that stands out when you're there, and you just look at it, and you're like...
Was it near the Appalachian Trail?
No, the Appalachian Trail, Vermont has its own trail called the Long Trail, which the AT branches off up through New Hampshire and everything,
right,
down in southern Vermont, but the Long Trail just kind of like, branches off from that. So
yeah. Well,
and that leads to a very, very ornately decorated kind of glittery golden road trail all the way to the base of this vault, where it's an unfinished pyramid shape, and it's a keyhole entrance inside of it. So the outside of it looks like the unfinished pyramid on the back of the dollar bill, and there's a keyhole of the shape for the entrance to go into the cave. And there's two kind of famous quotes. One is in the Bible, and it says, "The golden angel descends with the key to the great mystery," and his name is Alpha and Omega. He's the beginning and the end. So they put all those contexts together for a Sublime Prince in a pamphlet to kind of review, and they leave a bunch of mysteries to see if he's the one to be able to interpret them, to claim the order. But they left like kind of instructions behind, but they weren't very easy to find. And you had to be able to jump around and travel to all these locations. And I just thank God I had Google Photos and other research projects in other parts of the world that were already started. And there was a lot of intrigue about this for years. Like even priests were going nuts over it in France, finding stuff about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I could talk about this stuff all night. We have a lot of traditions in the construction industry, and I'd love to have you back sometime. And I would be more prepared, I think, now after talking with you this time. I didn't quite know what to expect, but I think I could be better prepared.
That's cool. And, we can focus on one, adventure. I like the adventure side of it. I like the stories because they lead to real-world discoveries of places that you can go and see yourself,
That would be cool. We should schedule something like that. Yeah.
I'd be happy to work on that with you guys.
All right. Well, thank you. We've been going over a little over 2 hours, and I really appreciate you coming, Breaker. And maybe next time we'll have our audio issues worked out. And I think it's just one of those nights where they didn't want us all together.
Yeah, that would be cool, man. And I do, like I said, man, I do appreciate you taking the time to just kind of introduce me to everybody. And I hope we had, interesting discussion online. Did anybody have any questions that they wanted answered about anything?
No, I asked for questions. I didn't see any. My audience is kind of lazy sometimes.
That's cool. That's all right too.
Just kidding, guys. But they just want to be entertained, I guess. But anyway, I appreciate you coming, and we'll schedule another show because this is very interesting. This is one of the most interesting topics to me and maybe it's just a personal thing, but
that's cool.
Maybe we can talk Patrick into coming back too. So, but thank you, and I'll be talking to you online. And thanks a lot, Breaker. I appreciate you coming.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, and it's good to hear somebody else from Tennessee, man. I miss being in Tennessee. To be honest with you, I plan to go back there at some point and visit family when I travel back across country. But it's probably been like 10 years since I've been back to Tennessee. My family was in a nice plot of land for a while. It was in 40 miles west of Nashville, in a place near Bucksnort, Tennessee. So I don't know that. Do you know where that exit is, Bucksnort, Tennessee?
Is that on the way up to near Maryville? Where is that? Or is that Middle Tennessee?
So you go west on the I-40 out of Nashville, and you hit like Waverly and McEwen.
Oh, like around Camden over there?
Gorman,
Waverly. Yeah.
Yeah. That's where my grandparents raised up and raised my family. My dad was like a hick on the farm, and he got to go to Princeton, was nominated was elected to be the first president of the Boy Scout Explorers. He was just kind of like taken back by all the, the prestige they gave him and everything. Just some guy off the farm that made it, So I'm kind of I'm still a very, very agrarian person at heart, and I still, miss that sort of lifestyle of having, those sorts of things. So thank you again for, helping to remind me about things like that and, the importance of getting the word out to as many people who are the volunteers of this sort of organization. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's really cool. But thank you, and I'll be talking with you.
Yeah, buddy.
Thank you. I'll
talk soon.
See you.
It's good meeting you.
All right. Well, I almost forgot he was on the phone there for a second. Thanks everyone in the crowd. I'm sorry if it was the audio was bad. We had trouble early on. The show was late. We almost didn't do the show. finally we decided to just do it on the phone. So maybe next time we'll have that worked out. He's a very interesting fella. I know that he's taking some criticism online, but I wanted to get, you always like to find out the underlying, personalities of people. And I think he's a really nice guy. And I'd like to have him back sometime. What did you think, Patrick?
Yeah, he seemed pretty nice. Yeah, very well informed, and he had a lot of answers. Like that's it's reassuring to hear that he didn't seem to be going from a place of mystery or like from a place of like we were talking about before. I was kind of asking him to describe how he feels about the human ability to be swayed about looking too deeply into the mystery and all that, and kind of like seeing. He used the term pareidolia, which is cool. That means the effect when we see faces and things.
Say the word again. You roboted right when you said the word para.
It's pareidolia, Paredolia. It's when we see faces and things. This is the strength of your fusiform cortex. The fusiform cortex is very strong, and interestingly, it's stronger in the East than in the more developed Western nations, according to lots of research. So we've said, and a lot of that we think is because of the whole communication, community-based, relational regulated communities is the way that Joseph Henrich talks about it. He says it's like 88% of the world or so is in these relational regulated communities, recognize faith much more easily than we can. And they say that like we sacrificed that region of the brain for better descriptive and categorical prowess, which is what we see in like psychological terminology and just general reductionism and everything you get with that in the Western categorical imperative.
I brought the rock up a little too late, but I meant to, he had asked me to use that as his avatar or a thumbnail. So I thought that was interesting how that ties into what you were just saying.
Yeah, like we have a tendency to see things, and that's good to see that people are taking it seriously and being wary of that.
Well, thank you for joining in. I appreciate it. And I'll talk to you soon.
Sure.
Thanks everyone in the audience. Appreciate you showing up. It was really awesome having you there, and we will see you on the next PiFi show.